everyone. Welcome to aXpire's podcast in May 2019. I'm here with Brian Herbert of ViableMkts, a partner of ours, and we're strongly supporting their upcoming conference at the end of June. I suggest you all check it out. We'll have more details to share in our channel, and also we'll share some details with how you can get in contact with Brian and learn more about the conference. It's one of those few conferences that I'll still go to, and I know other people who are ex-Wall Street will still go to, because there's still that sense of institutional quality in the people who attend, which is huge. So with all that said, Brian, would love to hear a little bit about you, and then maybe you could tell us a little bit more about ViableMkts and why you're doing a conference around cryptocurrencies.
Sure. So first of all, Matt, happy to be on the aXpire podcast. Thank you so much for taking the time with us today. So again, my name is Brian. I'm a consultant here at ViableMkts. About 2 months in at this point, so really excited to be here and still learning the ropes. My background is in fintech startups. I worked at Earnest Research previously, which was a buy-side data analytics firm, and my educational background was in electrical engineering. ViableMkts, we're a capital markets, fintech-focused strategic consulting firm. And I think we chose to do a cryptocurrency conference because we do numerous conferences focused on different asset classes throughout the years. And basically, as everyone has seen, digital assets are here to stay. So I think we wanted to build a conversation about what that future is going to look like and how it's going to fundamentally transform the way that capital markets work.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And touched a little bit there on the side of cryptocurrencies that relate to capital markets, which I think is a massive side. Clearly, we're going down the route of everything that can apply to securities. We'll see some form of blockchain and cryptocurrency touching it in some way in the future. There's a lot to do with programmable securities that would add value, and a number of different areas you can go into that. So derivatives, all those sort of things. And so I've seen some conferences that do a little bit about the intersection of crypto and Wall Street in capital markets. And then obviously there's a ton of conferences out there that touch on cryptocurrencies and really how they're going to change different aspects of business. So with that being said, could you share a little bit, Brian, about how you think your particular conference, this Crypto Evolve conference at the end of June, is going to differentiate from what's out there? And I gave my view, but would love to hear it from the horse's mouth.
Yeah, of course. So I mean, we just had Blockchain Week here in New York, which featured, tens, maybe hundreds of different conferences, right. An absolute madhouse in Manhattan. And I think what separates us from sort of like a consensus, which covers all areas of distributed ledger technology and sort of all applications of blockchain, some covering finance, but more so across the broad spectrum of what all the potential use cases are, is that our conference is specifically focused on the development of the institutional digital asset markets and then building the technological infrastructure to back that up. So from a high-level conceptual standpoint, I'd say we're very much a B2B conference focused on bringing industry leaders together in an intimate setting rather than a B2C conference. And I think we certainly do focus on some areas of the retail market, but we're primarily trying to get institutions like investment banks, broker-dealers, exchanges, custodians, venture capitals, law firms, and basically just trying to figure out what are the infrastructures that need to be built so that there can be institutional adoption of digital asset technology, whether that be on a cryptocurrency side, whether that be in a more general use case of digital ledger technology like you've seen with JPM Coin at JP Morgan.
Yeah, that was kind of an interesting turnaround from Jamie Dimon there, but interesting to see that they're coming out with something at least and supporting the cause rather than going against it. So any good news is news I'll take on the institutional side of things, especially. Exactly, especially coming around Fidelity coming out with its admission of looking to get into the crypto custody space, which is huge. Obviously, that's a big part of the infrastructure that we hear all about in terms of what's being built to allow institutional money to come in. So glad to hear that there's a lot of other sides of institutional interest in this space. And so with that being said, I know the conference has quite a few different panels on it, everything from how you can get exposure to cryptocurrencies in your fund as a portfolio manager, to custody, to the different potential B2B applications of it. And we're quite B2B focused. maybe we'll have a few B2C products, but I think this area of blockchain is one that's going to take some time to really get built out because it's so infrastructure heavy to get people comfortable with it. So with that being said, were you thinking about the different areas these institutions would be interested in creating your panels, or maybe you give a little bit of a flavor of what's kind of to be expected on the panel side of things at the conference? Like what big subjects are you looking to ensure that institutional people get access to or hear more about?
At crypto-evolve.com, for those watching, you might want to pull it up while I'm talking about it.
Right.
But basically, this is the second year that we've done this conference, and we're really trying to build off themes from last year. And so what we're primarily focused on, as I kind of mentioned before, is what's really important to institutional clients at this stage. So, for example, some of our panels focus on the legal issues and regulatory matters surrounding the future of different products. So how will the SEC eventually come down on a ruling for a Bitcoin ETF? How are they going to regulate new products? We actually have Tim Masad as one of our keynote speakers, who is the former chairman of the CFTC, and he wrote a really important paper about what his vision for the future of regulation in the digital asset space will be, and also advocating to get there sooner rather than later, because the longer you leave the door open with these questions, it not only hinders the adoption by the institutional market, but it leaves kind of more activity for bad actors to engage in while everything's sort of up in the air. And another thing that's really near and dear to our hearts is data. So in these new markets, how do you get access to high quality data? And then what kind of tools and solutions exist out there to help you leverage this data to trade, or just to help better understand the market? So those are kind of just a handful of the issues we're looking at. But I think a big thing as compared to this year that was different from last year is last year focused a lot on education surrounding blockchain, surrounding digital assets, because while it's been around for over a decade now in some form, I think a lot of institutions are still struggling conceptually with what type of asset is this? Is this a security? Is it a currency? Are there different use cases depending on which coin you're using? So we've really transitioned now that I think there's a better understanding common throughout the industry from a conference focused on education and now more towards implementation.
Right. No, it's quite interesting because you see over even a year that it's changed from a question of, is this even an asset class, or kind of how do you think about this as an asset class? And there was a good amount of news that's been coming out consistently around looking at this as a potential new alternative asset class, to one of, all right, now that we'll accept that it's legitimate, how do we get into it? How do we build infrastructure that will make us comfortable with using it? How do we actually get behind this as an institution and with a straight face or with confidence to our LPs and our investors, say that this is confidently backed by the same level of security, the same level of integrity in those you may be investing in, if it's on the investing side, as any other type of alternative asset class. So that kind of transition from questioning if it's even really a thing to, all right, how do I get into this thing, has clearly happened. And I think that's a great thing for the space. With that being said, are you willing to gamble perhaps on what next year's could be? Is it thank God for my 100K Bitcoin, or are we looking more on the side of different types of architecture that have been built out and infrastructure that people are using, and now it's kind of next level, like things like derivatives? So how do you see next year playing out?
Yeah, so I think, just to be clear, the short answer to that question is we don't know. We're certainly not experts, but I think a big part of our a big part of our conference is gathering these industry leaders and then collecting sentiment data to see how they feel about this topics and kind of what are the big trends that they believe are going to be occurring over the next 12 months, 24 months. And then we're going to, at least from our conference standpoint, let that guide us for what the topics are going to be for next year. From my own personal standpoint, I think one of the most interesting things that you just mentioned is new products, because there's a whole litany of either derivatives or different financial structures that you can implement using the digital asset framework that fundamentally, I think from a financial standpoint, is no different. It's just with a different back end. And so how will regulation guide that process, and what solutions will that create that weren't available before because of just the difference in how the back end is implemented? Whether that be something like cross-border, transactions or instant settlement. I think there's a lot of interesting trends that the technology allows you to take advantage of for a similar financial product that just simply weren't possible before.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And to your point, it is an element of a back end that's changing. There are a lot of funds that we've spoken to that have obviously an interest in this, but they also have an interest in kind of how AI is changing the way they operate, and maybe more so machine learning for businesses, where it's more of a simple version of AI. It could be anything from, just predictive text for when I go to enter. For us, we've seen that in invoicing, for example, but it could be to the extreme of how does sentiment speak to what we might release as a product 5 years from now. All those kind of things in AI are actively being talked about in the same breath as blockchain. And then obviously if AI is a little 2018 for you, I suppose, or 2007, I'm not sure where to quite place it relative to blockchain. It could be concurrent. There's also discussions around quantum computing and how that's going to impact both of those two technology trends and a few other things. If you go even further back, you can look at Internet of Things, for example. So what was the appeal to ViableMkts and behind crypto specifically and informing this particular conference over, say, perhaps AI or quantum? What spoke to you in crypto that echoed a need in the institutional world?
Definitely. So I think, as you said, there's AI and crypto are kind of on similar points on the innovation timeline, where there's a lot of money going into the space. I can't tell you how many, I'm sure you're familiar, AI startups there are. That's kind of what even AI or machine learning solutions that they actually have, aside from getting it in their name.
Right.
So that the interest is definitely there. And I think now for both technologies, it's kind of the time where, all right, we got this cool technology. What do we do with it? What are the actual business applications? And you're seeing the need is no longer, you still need massive technological innovation at every stage of these products, but you're also seeing now you need business experts who are able to take those technologies and figure out what are the actual solutions in the real world market. And I think what really attracted us to the crypto space as opposed to something like AI is there's a clear need for expertise in market structure around these digital assets, because you've seen, whether that be the hacks over the past several years or just the rampant market manipulation within some of these blockchains, it's clear that the initial round of people who built these digital asset structures were very smart. They set up a really compelling technological solution, but they haven't yet put in the safeguards that are going to be able to modernize this space. And I think that given the expertise of the firm, we've got a lot of people who've had 20 years in institutional finance. Market structure is a topic near and dear to their hearts. So I think that's what attracted it to us. And we've also seen from the clients that we deal with, there's a need to understand the space and figure out how do we make this look like something that's familiar to us. And I think building both the technology and then just the business logic that'll allow you to achieve that is something that's of great concern to the people we work with into the space more generally.
Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense. And I don't necessarily think they have to be, like, all these technologies have to be mutually exclusive. If anything, there's a lot of interesting synergies that can come out of something that is as concurrent as AI and blockchain is in working together. So everything from empowering smart contract creation with AI, if you were going to use that predictive text example again, whereby you could perhaps code faster with that, or different things that we're seeing in invoicing world, for example, whereby machine learning compares an invoice to a ton of other invoices, and then the blockchain is more the data integrity piece. But we're finding a lot of actual synergies between the two. So people often ask, why this over another? And I guess our answer to that is it's not often the case that you'll find a company who's open to one of those two being against the other. So it's interesting to see how those two will develop together. And I agree with you, it has to be built in an institutional way so that they'll actually be comfortable using this in the same way they'd use any other piece of technology, or if it's on the investing side, investing in any other alternative asset class. So it's good to see multiple innovations happening at once, specifically in the institutional world, because that's hopefully just going to get people all the more comfortable that it's no more aggressive than technologies that they were using maybe 5-10 years ago. I'm not sure if, for example, even a few years ago, Power BI, which is a new Microsoft tool, just data visualization, like that was perhaps a little intimidating at first for some companies, but once you put it behind an institutional firewall and put it on a hosted server on AWS, you can build these safeguards. It's kind of an analogy or metaphor for what's going on with blockchain. You're having these custodians being built. You're having capital market groups, including yourselves, who can back the same experience that they'd expect from any other type of security, or if it's a security token or any other type of institutional grade technology like Bloomberg, where you have support, where you have people ensuring that your money is if it's misplaced password wise, that it's not gone forever, which is just a totally unacceptable risk for institutional investors. So those kind of things are all coming out it seems like in a similar technological pace, which is good to see, and hopefully next year we'll see even more of that, and would be interested to see what the sentiment says. But for you guys looking at this conference with sentiment, just to close this out, thinking what would be your ideal outcome or ideal client? How could you deliver value, in your view, to a potential client in this type of space? And with that said, what would be their best way to get in touch with you?
Yeah, so I think from the Crypto Vault conference standpoint, as I said, it's focused on gathering thought leaders from the institutional side. But that kind of splits into two different parts. There's kind of the old guard of financial institutions that are established, that are looking to innovate. And then we've also got new firms that are more akin to startups that are building out-of-the-box solutions that are either trying to compete and force older financial firms to innovate, or to provide solutions to them and partner with them. So I think firms that will get the most benefit out of the conference are those with solutions that they're looking to partner with institutional clients, either to provide them with a solution or to help them build out their infrastructure from within. And then also any firms that have an interest in the space and are just trying to build an education around what are the emerging themes within DLT, within blockchain, within cryptocurrencies. And the best way to reach us, which I can provide you afterward, is the link to our site. It's got all our contact information on there, our agenda, the link to our speakers, and a couple of other interesting facets of the conference that we have. And then from the viable market side, I think any financial market institution that is serious about innovation, that wants to begin building out some new capabilities, would be a good match for us. Primarily, we focus on building fixed income front office technologies. And some of the examples of the work we've done in the past is research, help people figuring out where the market's going, education around market structure and innovation, and also helping to accelerate the learning process around new and emerging technologies like electronic trading platforms, like digital assets. And that's available on our site, ViableMkts.com, which I'll provide to you as well. But Matt, thanks so much for having me on today. It was a lot of fun. Glad I could make my inaugural appearance on the podcast. But it was great talking to you, and I wish all the best to aXpire.
Thanks, Brian. Appreciate it. We'll include all those notes in the footer of the video, but thanks so much for coming on, and very excited to attend this year's event and hopefully many events to come, and here's to viable market success. Thank you, Brian.
Indeed. Have a good day.
Nice.